Hi, it's Saturday morning. Welcome to the Rich Lieberman Media Pulse. Hope you're having your coffee. You're settled in. Weather's a little bit more tamer. It's going to be a nice weekend. And we're here live on. Did you like how I said that? We're here live on YouTube. And I'm here pretty much every day, sometimes even multiple times, depending upon news, depending upon broadcasting situations and developments and various tidbits along the way. It's Saturday morning. I'm here today to talk about some of the great Bay Area sports broadcasters, particularly the play-by-play people. And it's quite a list. We have some of the greatest luminaries all came out of the Bay Area. Some originally from other areas, but the bulk of their highlight career came out of San Francisco and Oakland. And I want to talk a little bit about today. This comes, by the way, after I have secured live in this palatial studio. Joe Starkey will be here on September the 12th. That's a Thursday at 11 o'clock Pacific Coast time. It'll be live. He'll be here for an hour. It'll be interactive. We'll talk about everything. I'm going to interview him and, maybe offer a few other questions and tidbits that don't normally are not explored. And I'm going to try to do my best. And I've interviewed many people, Ted Robinson, on the sports, and I've got a lot of things planned. But back to the main topic today, and that has to do with the great play-by-play people. I grew up in the 70s, like many of you, listening to, admiring Bill King, who was just an out-and-out phenomenon. Then there was Lon Simmons. I'm going to go individually on some of these people, and I'm going to leave out somebody, and you'll not correct me, but you're going to tell me who I left out and all that. And that's fine, because there's so many people that started here, began their career here, or came here, etc. I remember and grew up on Bill King, who did the Raiders, who did the Warriors, who eventually would do the Oakland A's. And who am I leaving out? The Raiders. Did I say the Raiders? Of course I did. So I listened to Bill King and Lon Simmons. And Lon was just, oh my God, too good to be true. Funny, poignant, amazing pipes, great voice. Be a good idea if the Giants were to walk somebody here. Lon Simmons, wow. Who else might? I'm growing up on the college circuit, Joe Starkey, who's going to be here on, again, September 12th. Hank Greenwald. Oh, my God. What a play-by-play guy. And he did the Warriors, too. And both he and Bill King did both two sports. Did the Warriors. Greenwald did the Warriors, the Giants, and Bill King did three sports simultaneously: Raiders, Warriors, and then beginning in 81 was doing the Oakland A's. And for a while, he did all three sports. It was amazing. And, obviously, it goes without saying, Bill King was just unbelievable. Had the great voice, was funny. If those of you, many of you have said, and I agree, that basketball was his best sport, doing the Warriors. That was my life, folks, in the 70s. We'd go to Warriors games. I remember being in a youth group at my temple. We'd go to the Warriors game. We'd see Bill King at courtside. He had the microphone strapped to his chest, and be doing like this, and he'd be standing up, right? He'd be standing up, and Al Laddles, the coach of the Warriors at the time, he'd be standing in front of Bill, and Bill King would have to do this. He'd kind of a beave around, and he had the mic on, and well, you heard Bill King. And if you didn't, go archive Bill King, Google it, go to YouTube. You'll hear a master at work. And loved him with the Warriors. And I loved, as did you, when he ripped the officials and would just go off. It was hysterical. And remember, describing the most pristine, accurate. You felt like you were right there. Rick Barry, 24-footer, good. And Clifford Ray and Jamal Wilkes. And I mean, that amazing season when the Warriors won the first championship, 74-75. One of the greatest upsets, I may add, of all time. Bill King didn't have a co-partner, didn't need anybody. He was just there. And I remember Bill King as a little kid. Well, I wasn't that little. I was in my teens. Remember the term simulcast? Bill King would do the radio account of the game, and he would do the television. And he would always have, remember the preamble at the beginning of the telecast, the simulcast? Folks, those of you listening on radio or watching on television, some things I will describe that will be fairly obvious, but we're doing a simulcast tonight. And it was funny. And he was so terrific. You cannot keep complimenting him. He was so good. And look, he had an edge. A lot of people, some I should say, didn't like the fact that he was always on the officials. That was part of his repertoire. It was part of his deal. And he was sincere. He didn't rip the refs. And by the way, a lot of those refs needed to be ripped, right? Mindy Rudolph, go on and on and on. But Bill was special. He was terrific. He was great doing the Raiders too. And you know, this I know you can find rather easily. His calls, the Sea of Hands catch, Clarence Davis against Miami in the playoff game. Fortunately, they didn't go to the Super Bowl. That was one of their Achilles heel, were the Raiders. They couldn't win the big one. Remember that? Maybe like a team close to our zone these days. But you know, he did the Super Bowl when the Raiders finally won. They got the monkey off their back and they beat Minnesota on January 9th, 1977, Dateline, Pasadena, the Rose Bowl. They beat the Minnesota Vikings. And he had such terrific, I mean, the old man Willie, touchdown, you know, Raiders. Willie Brown returning an interception and going the length of the field. Fred Biletnikoff with that great catch. The Ghost catching the ball in the end zone, Dave Casper, all those great calls. Bill King, fantastic. Hank Greenwald. I wasn't a big Giants fan. I grew up Oakland watching the A's, right? But Hank Greenwald was terrific. Humorous, terrific baseball announcer, as he was, I think, underrated doing the Warriors. But I loved Hank Greenwald on baseball. Oh my God. You know, I had a chance to sit in the press box for many, many baseball games in the 80s at the Coliseum and at Candlestick before, obviously, the waterfront park, Oracle, as it's known now. And Hank was a gracious man, always wore a suit, had a kind of a cigar, you know, wore the hat every now and then. And not only was he terrific calling the play-by-play, but complete, you know, professional gentleman. Walked around. It was just kind of a, well, obviously, it was a different era, but he was fantastic. And you know, I remember the first year, was it 79? Yeah, that Lindsey Nelson, they hired Lindsey Nelson to the Giants. And I think that was the first year, yeah, that they were on KNBR. But it was Lindsey Nelson, you know. Need I say more? And Lindsey Nelson was a national broadcaster, right? Did the Mets, obviously Notre Dame football, right? Notre Dame highlights. Remember that show? And he got to work with Hank, I believe 1 or 2 years, was it? But it was terrific. Some other announcers. Got to meet all these people. I got to meet Bill King several of times. Lon Simmons, who every bit is sincere and genuine off the air as he was on the air. Just that kind of a guy. Um, Ted Robinson, who I've described here as just fantastic. Ted Robinson knew the moment, you know, and it's why he does multiple sports: tennis, football, college basketball. He did the 49ers. Um, but he didn't go crazy. He was excited. He was enthusiastic. He had a great, crisp play by play. Look, a lot of this is subjective. I know other people's opinions are other people's pros and cons. Some people love somebody, some people don't. You know, John Miller of the Giants, like him, don't love him. Think he's very good. He's humorous. He's got, mechanically speaking, all of it down. Um, I think later on in his career that Miller is, want to kind of talk more about himself and make funny stories that are not that funny anymore. But again, that's an aside. Look, he's in the Hall of Fame and he is a great baseball announcer. I remember when Miller was doing USF basketball and he did soccer. I wasn't around. In fact, Joe Starkey, I hope, will tell this story about when John Miller began his broadcast career in the Bay Area in 1974 with the Oakland A's. Miller's a Hayward native. He and Joe Starkey were very close. And I think well, I'm going to let Joe Starkey tell the story. So I like John Miller. Years and years, I was 13 years old at the time, 1975. Do you remember Al Michaels doing the Giants? Al Michaels, yeah, that guy. Do you believe in miracles? Yeah, Al Michaels, who, of course, went on to become a great national broadcaster. Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football now, of course, Sunday Night Football with NBC, of course, the hockey. I put him on the map, right? He is special. I like Al Michaels, always liked Al Michaels. Had a chance to interview, see if you can look this up. Al Michaels and Dan Deerdorf were doing Monday Night Football, and they were doing the game from Candlestick. 49ers were playing, and this was back about 30 years ago. And of course, the game started at 5 o'clock, right? Because it's West Coast. I did an interview live at the Clift Hotel after the game on a Monday night with Al Michaels at the Clift. He did a bit with Larry King. That was when Larry King was doing radio, Mutual. And I did an interview with Larry, but Larry was primarily the cog there interviewing Al Michaels, and had a blast. And, Michaels he's a professional. I think he's really, really good friends with Art Spander, the beloved columnist. Remember him? He's still alive. A sports columnist who wrote for the Examiner and the San Francisco Chronicle. And in any event, Al Michaels is a Bay Area guy. Grew up on the peninsula, lives in LA now. But Al Michaels was very special. Did the Giants. And that was when the Giants were probably at their lowest point in Bay Area sports. They're drawing crowds of 500 people and, thousands of people. No, but like 2 or 3,000. They did draw one night. I think it was like 800 people or something like that. And Al Michaels was there in 75. So we have Al Michaels. I mentioned Ted Robinson, Lon Simmons, Hank Greenwald, the great Bill King. I like Ken Korak, who broadcast for the A's. I don't really want to talk about the A's that much anymore because of what. But yeah, Korak, I think, is underrated. Hockey, one of my favorites is Randy Hahn, Drew Remenda. They did the Sharks. And Randy has been with the Sharks, 30 plus years. One of the original Sharks broadcasters, just an utterly professional, spectacular, gives a great account of hockey. I've often said, look, like many of you, wasn't a hockey guy, but Randy Hahn made the sport so invigorating. I've become quite a hockey guy. I watch the playoffs, and I hope the Sharks get better because I'd uh, love to experience. Who knows? Stanley Cup playoffs here. Be nice to hoist the cup one of these years, one of these days. I mentioned this that I got to meet a lot of these guys. I got to meet Randy Hahn and Drew Remenda. Not only meet him, but sit up in the catacombs up there at the Shark Tank in San Jose and do um, an interview with both. Got to meet both, just great people. Drew Remenda, spectacular as a color guy, Randy Hahn. And in fact, I think I mentioned this, but Joe Starkey was the original television play-by-play guy when the Sharks had their first season in actually played at the Cow Palace in 90 and 91 before moving on down to San Jose. So we've had some fantastic play-by-play people. And look, what made Bill King so terrific is some of his biggest side things, like the riffing on the refs, like the game, the holy roller game, the game where Stabler fumbled the ball, Casper kind of pushed it into the end zone. That was against the San Diego Chargers back in 1978, and Bill King saying, "Oh my God, Madden is out on the field. The refs are telling him, get your big fat butt out." They won the game. You got to listen to Bill King. And of course the Immaculate Reception, which was still can't put that back. I cried the very next day when that happened. So look, a lot of you 49ers fans, don't feel, bad that you haven't won for 30 plus years, whatever. You have 5 rings, right? So Raiders are always heartaches back in the 70s when they couldn't nail down that final playoff game to go to a Super Bowl, but Bill King was just terrific. Again, I agree. Basketball, his best sport. I loved him doing, I think baseball was his least successful sport, but he was still great. More than anything else, what made Bill King special was the fact he was a wordsmith. He could describe, and it wasn't shock value. There was no histrionics. There was all this kind of, and he knew I keep using this phrase a lot. He knew the moment. He didn't go crazy and scream, and it was just a different time. And those of you who have listened to Bill King, you know what I'm talking about. And what made him so fantastic was the fact that, yes, of course, he wanted the team which he was broadcasting for, the Raiders, the Warriors, the A's. He wanted them to win, but he was just as excitable when he broadcast the opposition scoring a touchdown, or in the case of baseball, getting a home run, and basketball. And he was critical, overly critical sometimes, but that was Bill King, and he built up such an amazing resume and credibility and history. I've heard Bill King, one of the great ones. I mean, when I think of great broadcasters, you got to look at all sports, right? Um, Red Barber, Russ Hodges, and I didn't get to hear Russ Hodges with Lon Simmons, but I've heard obviously taped renditions and things like that. But King was just really, really special, and I put him on par in line with a Vin Scully. And obviously Vince Scully was just unbelievable. Radio and television, of course. Like I said, and I think you'll agree, his third best sport was baseball. Basketball was number one. Football was right there, And Bill was an amazing person. And, let's face it, at the time he was doing three sports, people were just, you know, he was doing three sports simultaneously, mind you. Yeah, his frequent flyer miles were unbelievable, shall we say. But he loved it. And he led a esoteric life, right? He lived in Sausalito and drove like a $2 Rambler. It was a really ugly car for a guy that was quite, the guy, and he used to eat flamboyant food, and he loved Russian literature and opera. It was just an unbelievable guy. And you paired him with Lon Simmons. We had, oh my God, the greatest tandem, in my lifetime. And it was just exciting. And, the A's were starting to get good back then. And then, of course, the World Series years, which they lost 2 out of 3, unfortunately. But they did sweep, I believe, a team in what was it, 89? There was a little earthquakey thing. Okay, get my little dig in. So we've had some fantastic broadcasters, play-by-play guys in this area. And I think we will appreciate them more in time, because it was a hell of a moment having all these great voices, right? And Ted Robinson and Lon and Bill King. And I like Greg Papa, like the more basketball that I do with the 49ers. I made it very clear and open about. I don't like his touchdown call, but I'm beating it dead horse on that. So my deal on that. And those of you that don't know, look it up. It's out there. So it is Saturday. I hope you have a great day. They have this big concert going on the outside lands, which I'm not interested in. I wouldn't be near a crowd like that anyway, let alone Golden Gate Park. And it was warm. Suddenly it's freezing. I will be out and about. And again, we're here every day. Little housekeeping right now. If you can, please contribute to my cause. I bring you live content, opinions, commentary, information, entertainment, occasionally some scoops, live interviews. Subscribe to my channel here on YouTube and become a member and spread the word. Simple enough. Thanks. See you later.